So the question of how can we create space for communities to engender and nourish civic power and connections is a really important question. And I think one of the immediate answers I have to that is don't crowd the space out. Don't do for people what it is they can do for themselves. In a lot of instances, what we've done is we've replaced civic life with programs and services. We've begun to do things to and for communities that in many respects they're best placed to do themselves with each other. And the issue is because they don't have sufficient connection with each other, it's really hard for them to move into that collective action. Look, we exist in a paradigm whereby we think the only way to fix problems around poverty and inequality is by the provision of services. So this idea that we would actually expand and enlarge civic space is a new idea in the scheme of things for agencies, because typically what we've done is gone into civic space and often grown dependency. So the critical starting point is to ask the question, what are we not going to do to be helpful? How do we remove interventions that are doing harm to civic space and actually increase the community building that helps make those connections? I think one of the other things is to stop working out of silos, stop organizing your services to the institutional imperative and start trying to organize them the way people organize their lives. So many communities experience different agencies coming in with their agenda, working with target groups like young people and older people. And actually an awful lot of what we're talking about in terms of expanding civic life is about connections across those differences, connecting young people with older people where they live. And I really feel that sometimes we do harm to that when we go in and we start working with target groups and we silo people. I think silos are where smart people go to do dumb things. And we really need to figure out a way of not segregating or siloing people by age or by categorization, but instead really building those connections. So it's about redefining people, not as clients of our services, but as citizen, friend, and neighbor in a democracy. So I think one of the essential questions around creating space as well in the sense of citizen space is to recognize when we're talking about community, what we're actually talking about is what happens beyond formal technology in the sense of the machine and institutional life. And also what we're talking about beyond that space, what happens beyond the limits of the institution is life itself. So I just wanted to say a few words about what I think are the functions of community in that space beyond the limits of the institution. And I think in a whole range of different ways, you know, there is work to be done, citizen work. So I just want to describe to you what I think is the job of the citizen. So I think it's a civic job, it's a citizen job to create care. Care is the freely given gift of the heart, one person to another. So it's not a service, it's not a system, it's not a product, it's not a program. And in that sense, you can't curricularize it or manage it. It's produced through relationships, through connection, through kinship. And it's very important to recognize that belongs to civic space, to mutuality, and to community. The other is raising powerful and connected and confident children. We understand that some children must be looked after by the system, but everybody advocates the idea that primarily children are best cared for in the heart of community and family life. I think another function of community is ensuring that the food we eat is safe and is tasty and is nourishing. We've become increasingly, as consumers, more and more distant from the source of our food. But we can take that back and we can begin to really ensure that the food that we consume and produce is as local as possible. I think another function is aging well, is actually ensuring that we can age well close to home. While I accept that all of these functions are obviously functions that can also be performed by institutions, what I've seen in my work is that those functions are best performed by community when the community is connected and is strong. Health is another function. We often think of health as something that's produced by a hospital or by a doctor. But actually, the epidemiological evidence reminds us that health is primarily about community assets. The extent to which I'm in relationship, I'm looking after myself, my environment, and my connection to it, and my well-being has also got economic connections. So these are all things that we can do something about through the work of citizenship and community life. I also think that public safety is something that is primarily the work of citizens. A 16-year study done by Sampson in Chicago demonstrated that the two things that determine our safety in the public domain are how many neighbours we know by first name and how many times we associate outside our own homes in the built shared environment. So these are some of the many functions, or if you like, the work of community life, the work of citizenship. And if these things don't get done by community, there isn't an institutional proxy for them, certainly not one that's sufficient to replace. So I think if we don't do that work, it simply won't get done. And in a way, that's the call to action. It's to actually recognize that there is work that citizens must do, there's work that agencies must do, and there's things that we must do together. So learning how we can actually create a proportional or right relationship across those functions is absolutely central to Devo Manx and indeed to the future of the Northwest.